Hello, role-playing people! And today we're going to talk about just how intense RPGs can get. How much emotion can players radiate, and how much of a grip does that have on the group? Well, you probably don't see it too often, but bursts of emotion, when channeled appropriately, are a blessing at the game table. They make things fun and intense for everyone, really. Sometimes emotion blooms on the spot as players get carried away in the heat of the moment. Other times they bring it with them in preparation for the game. Sometimes it is felt in character, and other times it's a matter of metagame floating somewhere outside of the narration, but still tied to the happenings and mechanics. Regardless of how it happens, showing emotion at the table is awesome. Let's look at these three instances together: being carried away, bringing emotion with you, and using the metagame. Being carried away by the moment and the descriptions is a beautiful thing. Many years ago, we were playing a Hunter the Vigil game, and the leader of a Hunter faction was trying to recruit our protagonists. We arrive at location to find this guy standing next to a vampire who was tied up very well and strapped to a chair. Now, his goal was to demonstrate to us that this creature, who really wasn't a monster, our characters knew that, but his goal was to demonstrate that this creature is everything that's wrong with the world and needs to be destroyed without any regrets. You could have heard a pin drop when the hunter clicked his lighter open. A shower of screams filled the room as he proceeded to burn the vampire's fingers off one by one. We were horrified and confused and didn't know what to do, but 2 players out of 3 started tearing up, myself included. The vampire itself was weeping tears of blood, and you know what, I will say no more, but I was just horrified by the level of cruelty a supposed savior of humanity is capable of. But this is the really dark, nasty example. Let's turn to something beautiful. This was during a mage game. My character was visiting someone's grave, and she just wanted to make it look nicer because the graves were pretty unkept and vegetation looked very dry. So, in a fit of emotion, because this place was secluded and removed from anyone's view, she just started dancing. She danced for hours, barefoot, falling onto the ground and rising again, raking the earth with her fingers, screaming, bleeding onto it as she occasionally hit thorn bushes and sharp edges of gravestones with her arms and legs. She dances until she collapses from exhaustion, from morning to afternoon. That's how I describe it. We roll for it, and I get an insane amount of successes. I really wasn't expecting anything of the like. So my storyteller wakes my character up to the sight of green leaves seen from underneath. My character is both on a bed of plants and covered by them. As she pushes herself to sitting position, her head emerges out of this thicket and meets the eyes of a doe that was drawn to this site by the copious use of life sphere. And she can't believe her eyes. The graveyard is overgrown with vegetation. All of the seeds crows dropped from their beaks on the ground nearby. All of the dry plants that looked like dead vines and thorns grew into a majestic young patch of green adorned with the colors of flowers. You could hear the humming of insects and chirping of birds and other small animals too. Life was just drawn to this site. The gravestones were covered in moss and leaves and flowers. A resting place for the dead became a playground for life. The doe sniffs at the character and then darts into the thicket and out of sight. So the protagonist gets to her feet in the fiery red light of a late summer dusk with dirt and dried blood in her hair on her arms and feet, without a scratch on her though, and starts making her way through the thicket back to her car. Because I didn't expect this to succeed so well, and because our storyteller for that game was a master of description and detail, the whole scene brought me to tears of joy. A character who had recently awakened and had no idea just how powerful she can be turns a graveyard into a monument to nature and life. It had me crying tears of joy. It was beautiful. Now let's move on to emotions players bring to the table as part of presenting their characters. If a character is out for revenge on someone, let's say, and from the first session they show everyone at the table that they will not stop until the target of their anger is destroyed. Whoa, that is powerful. It actually tends to bring the other players on board very quickly most of the time. Displaying emotion is something I've noticed most players rarely do from the start of the game because they want to test out the water and see what's what. But when players talk amongst themselves and with the GM before the game begins and people know who's playing what, it's so much fun to present your character in a moment of heightened emotion, like they're almost like they're defining emotion, as it were. So, for example, since I mentioned Mage, on the very first session of our Mage game, we all took turns acting out our characters' current situations and their awakenings, kind of like a prelude done at the table for everyone to see. My character was a 40-year-old mother whose daughter was in the hospital, between life and death. I knew what was going to happen because I had talked it out with the storyteller. This would be the event that awakens the character or eventually leads to her awakening. So I prepared ahead of time for this, trying to tap into the insane tension and agony of losing someone you love, just waiting for the call, So players could feel the character's tension and stress immediately as the GM started presenting my introductory scene. The character is at work, barely able to function, knowing her child is in the hospital, and as it has been every day for weeks now, she can't wait to go back to that hospital and be by her daughter's side, by her daughter's bedside, because she needs to work also, because her business depends on her livelihood depends on it, but she needs to be with her daughter. So the character can't eat, can't sleep, she's in a really bad place, but then the dam really breaks when she gets the call. Her daughter is in emergency surgery, they might not be able to bring her back. And I just burst into tears of despair. My hands were shaking, my whole face was twitching, turning red, I was choked up, I could barely talk through the sobbing. I think I was howling and hiccuping more than talking. And by the time the character got to the hospital, her daughter was dead. Now, throughout the scene, the players, my good friends who had never seen me like that, were in shock. They were like, "Is this guy okay? Are you okay?" So of course I took small moments to reassure them that I'm fine, smiling through the tear streaks down my cheeks, and telling them over and over again, "I'm okay, man, it's part of the introduction." And then I went back to weeping my heart out. Knowing that my character would become a death mage, a member of the Euthanatos tradition, I felt it necessary to remind people of the weight of loss, the tragedy that is someone leaving the world before their time. Looking back at it, I think it was my most intense and definitely the most publicly intense moment in our RPGs. And it was beautiful. Now, on the other hand, the entire group can be so excited about a certain event they've been working towards for a few sessions, they bring something akin to electricity to the game table. We had worked towards eating an NPC's soul in Demon the Fallen for a few weeks, texting each other about it in preparation. When the time came to execute the plan, which had been considered and reconsidered to perfection, our expectations were so intense. We brought an adrenaline rush to the game. We couldn't sit, we couldn't stand, we could barely wait for the storyteller's description. All we wanted to know was, is this going to work? And this ties in with the next type of emotion generating thing, the mechanics, the roles themselves, which are meta in the sense that they don't happen within the story itself, but they influence the outcome so much. So there we were, ready to execute our plan, but we didn't exactly have enough consumable stats to guarantee our success. We ran out of expendable faith and willpower, and it just came down to the rolls. It was frighteningly euphoric, knowing the success of a whole operation we had been preparing for weeks depended on the luck of the die. Now, we were perfectly ready to have this thing fail, and the storyteller was rolling in the open to show us everything is on the dice, no shenanigans here. Now, when the last roll was made, and success was official, we jumped, raised our fists to the ceiling, and shouted like savages. We were running around in joy, shaking each other's hands. Oh my god, it was insane. It was like when your favorite sports team makes a magnificent game-changing play and bam, they win. Against all odds, they win. We've had these moments in D&D or Pathfinder as well, when the HP starts getting a bit low and everyone's on the edge of their seat thinking, oh man, are we going to live through this? Please say we made good plays and we're gonna win. You roll the die knowing everything depends on this roll, and you present your result to the GM. After a long pause of perfect silence, you hear them go, how do you want to do this? Oh man, that is insane. So these are examples I can think of right now, but there are many other things that contribute to this. Personally, I like choosing soundtracks for my characters, and if the GM is on his feet when he sees me leading a powerful or emotional scene, he can play my jams. That always helps me tap into the emotion I want to show and match my words and pacing to the vibe or tempo of the song. So it makes for awesome scenes. There are times when a burst of emotion is tied to the conclusion of the session itself. This is probably as meta as you can get. And I will bring up Mage again because that game taught me a lot of things. I remember at the end of our very first session of Mage, we, the players, stood up and clapped and cheered. It was our storyteller's first time running a World of Darkness game, his first time ever running a World of Darkness game, running Mage, which is a pretty difficult game. It's very complex, there are a lot of things to consider. It's insane. And the introduction to the characters and the setting was just perfect. It was an extraordinary show of technique and emotion from everyone involved, especially the storyteller. So yeah, we were up on our feet, clapping away, congratulating this guy on a magnificent job. So there we have it. RPGs, despite the intellectual nature of the hobby, shall we say, can be very intense and emotional in all the right ways, just like a movie, just like a TV series, just like a play. Certainly, players getting into arguments and ruining the game is also emotional, but it's not the right emotion, and it's not channeled into the right thing. Especially if you're playing with people you know and trust, don't be afraid to let yourself get carried away by the game. It leads to some really memorable moments. That being said, I ask you, what was your most intense RPG moment? I look forward to reading your comments. Character emotions are great. Don't be afraid to show them. Take care, have a good one, and don't forget to play.